Daniel had lived in cities where no one knew your name and no one cared what you did. That changed when he moved to the small, fenced community of Briar Glen. The houses were clean, the lawns edged like magazine covers, and the rules printed in a 32-page welcome binder. He didn't mind. After years of service, a quiet home with routine sounded like peace. But within days of moving in, the silence felt off. Too tight, too watched. The first person to introduce herself didn't smile. Carla was the HOA's compliance officer, and her eyes scanned his front yard like a security camera with legs. She didn't ask if he needed help settling in. She asked about the contents of his garage. Daniel answered politely, locking the side door as she looked over his shoulder. He'd purchased the place for its privacy, detached garage, reinforced door, and one long steel box he rolled in personally. It wasn't just a safe, it was a vault. DOJ certified, dual-layer steel. Biometric lock. Only he had access, and only one person in the entire neighborhood seemed to notice its arrival. The questions didn't stop. Carla appeared on the sidewalk during his trash runs. She circled by on her morning walks, eyes trained on the corner where the safe had gone in. Then came the notes. Handwritten. Folded twice. Left under his doormat. The first one read, HOA has reason to believe unauthorized materials are being stored on premises? No name, no phone number. But Daniel knew the handwriting from the binder he'd signed on Mavin Day. He didn't react, not yet. Instead, he picked up a few items, a floor sensor, 2 silent cameras, 1 backup battery pack. He had seen what obsession looked like before in darker places, across barbed wire, beyond checkpoints. The difference here was that this obsession wore lipstick and had a clipboard. 3 nights later, he found muddy footprints by the side fence. That was the night everything shifted. Daniel studied the footprints by the fence in silence. The shape wasn't broad like a man's boot. It was narrow, shallow, and careful. The pattern matched the tread of sneakers, likely a woman's size, judging by the depth. They started at the sidewalk, crept along the bushes, and stopped just beneath the garage window. There were no marks on the glass, no scratches on the lock. Whoever it was had looked, not touched. Not yet. The next morning, Daniel mowed his lawn. He trimmed the hedges, waved to a neighbor he hadn't met, and glanced across the cul-de-sac. Carla was watering her flowers. Her hose was running, but her eyes weren't on her garden. They were on his garage. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat in the kitchen with the lights off, sipping cold coffee, watching his security feed on a tablet. At 2:16 a.m., the front camera flickered. It wasn't malfunction, it was motion. A figure approached the gate, hooded, small frame. The infrared kicked in. A woman stepped into view, crouched low, moving with odd confidence. She didn't hesitate. At the latch. She knew how it worked. Daniel watched her pass beneath the camera. She moved like she wasn't new to sneaking around. Like she knew where blind spots should have been, only there weren't any. She reached the garage door, paused, then tried the keypad. 4 digits. She entered one combination, then another. On the 3rd try, she stopped and pulled something from her coat. A small device flat with blinking lights. Daniel didn't wait. He opened a drawer, entered a 6-digit code into his backup panel, and tapped send. The house remained silent. The lights stayed off. But elsewhere, in a blacked-out federal console 2 states away, a red flag blinked to life. That safe inside Daniel's garage wasn't just strong. It wasn't just private. It was enrolled in a federal tracking program designed for officers under special assignment who needed emergency contact with armed enforcement. Tampering with it didn't just trigger an alarm. It triggered a response. Back outside, the woman was still trying. She crouched, pulled on gloves, and studied the hinges like she was preparing to pry them. Then something caught her attention. She stood up fast. A sound, a hum, a sudden vibration. In the air, car headlights turned the corner, but they didn't belong to neighbors. 2 dark SUVs glided down the street. Engines low, no sirens. They didn't stop. They didn't speed. They coasted, slow, purposeful. The woman stood frozen. Then, they did stop right in front of Daniel's driveway. Doors opened. Black boots hit pavement. Jackets unzipped just enough to reveal what hung beneath. The woman stepped back. Her hands started to rise. Daniel didn't watch the rest from the window. He was already walking out the front door. He knew the agents. More importantly, they knew him. He nodded once and pointed at the garage. They didn't need a warrant. Not after what she'd tried. Carla didn't speak as the agents surrounded her. Her hands were raised, her jaw locked tight. One agent gave a single command. She dropped the device in her hand, something small, cheap, unregistered. It hit the concrete with a flat clink. Daniel stood near the porch, arms crossed, watching the shadows move across his yard. No neighbors peeked through windows. Not yet. It was the quiet kind of chaos. Controlled, contained. The kind, the outside world wouldn't believe happened in a suburban cul-de-sac. One of the agents approached Daniel. She knew the layout, he said. The timing wasn't random. Daniel nodded once. I think she's been watching since day one. Inside the garage, they confirmed what Daniel already knew. No breach, no tampering on the vault, no fingerprint match on the door. But it was what the woman said when they placed her in the car that stayed with him. She has something in there. Something that doesn't belong to him. Not guns, not dangerous materials. She'd said she had something in there. Like, the safe was hers. Like she believed it. Daniel asked to speak with her before they left. One agent hesitated. Another allowed it 30 seconds. Carla's face was pale, more from fury than fear. She leaned forward in her seat, staring at him, through the open window. You think this is over? She said. Daniel didn't blink. I think it hasn't even started. She leaned closer. You don't know who you're protecting. That's safe. It's hiding more than you understand. He stepped back as the door slammed shut. The SUV reversed, turned, and slipped away into the night. Daniel stood in his driveway long after the noise faded. What did she mean by something that doesn't belong to him? Inside his house, the vault sat silent behind two locked doors. No one had touched it. No one but him. But now, every word Carla had spoken twisted like smoke in his mind. He unlocked it slowly. Entering the full biometric sequence, the hiss of pressure released as the door opened. The firearms were untouched. Untouched and perfectly logged, but something else drew his eye. A black envelope, unlabeled, thick tucked between documents he hadn't looked at in over a year. It wasn't his. He hadn't placed it there. Daniel reached for it without hesitation. Inside were photographs, old ones, black and white, a property survey, and beneath it, a list of signatures. The names struck him like a slap. One of them belonged to Carla. Another belonged to someone he hadn't heard from in over a decade, and on the back of the final page, there were numbers. Coordinates. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat in the garage. The documents spread before him, the weight of the past crawling up from the floorboards. If Carla knew about this, if she wanted him badly enough to break in, it meant someone else did too, someone higher than the HOA, and someone far more dangerous. The more Daniel stared at the signature, the less sense it made. Carla's name on the document wasn't surprising, but the second signature, a man named Martin Kells, reached back into places Daniel had closed off years ago. That name had once been tied to a classified case involving property laundering through front organizations posing as housing associations, HOA boards used as smokescreens, paper trails that ended in forged deeds. Kells had vanished after an internal investigation collapsed, and now, his name was tucked inside Daniel's own gun safe. But Daniel hadn't put it there. He checked the camera archives. The vault hadn't been opened in months, not until the night Carla tried to get in. That left one possibility. Someone else had entered his house long before she attempted it. Someone had planted it. Not recently, but when? The next morning, Daniel drove to the county records office. He requested the original development contracts for Briar Glen, something no one had looked at in nearly a decade. The clerk seemed confused, but after an hour, handed him a thick binder with dusty blueprints and old financial statements. He flipped through page after page until he found what he needed. The names of the HOA founders. Carla was on the list. So, was Martin Kells, and then, a third name crossed out. Written over. Daniel took a photo with his phone and left without speaking a word. Back in his garage, he compared the signatures. The handwriting on the original founding document didn't match the one in the envelope from the safe. The signature had been forged. Someone wanted him to believe that Kells had signed that document. But the stroke order, the pressure, it didn't align. Daniel had been trained to spot those things. Whoever planted the envelope didn't expect him to question the handwriting. They'd assumed the name alone would rattle him, and it had. He began a sweep of his entire home, this time looking not for threats but for clues. Behind the breaker panel, he found a flat chip taped to the frame. Not a bomb, a signal booster, a relay. which meant someone had been watching him for weeks, maybe months. He destroyed it and traced the signal history through a contact at his old agency. The booster had pinged a signal to a storage unit registered under an alias just towns over. Daniel didn't go to the police. He went there himself. The facility was quiet. Rows of silent, numbered doors. He had the code. He had the number, and when he opened it, he didn't find what he expected. There were shelves, folders, HOA documents, tax records, land transfers, and at the center, a corkboard covered in photographs. Of them were of Daniel. Walking his dogs. Working in the garage, coming and going from his house, but one image chilled him more than all the others. It showed Carla standing beside someone else. Someone Daniel recognized. It was Kells. Alive, present, and standing in front of the Briar Glen HOA clubhouse. Daniel stared at the photograph, his jaw locked tight. Kells was supposed to be gone, buried by a failed investigation, swallowed by sealed files and false leads. Yet here he was, older now, with silver at his temples and the same crooked stance. Carla stood beside him, arms crossed, her eyes trained on the camera like she knew it was there. This wasn't a hidden capture, it was intentional. It was a message. I meant for whoever found it. Daniel took the board off the wall and flipped it over. Scribbled in marker on the back was a single address. It wasn't local. The location was rural. Remote and old land tracked half a county away, part of a disputed border that had gone unclaimed since a mining company folded. Daniel remembered the name from the list of properties in the HOA storage unit. One document had been stamped with a pending annexation order, signed under Carla's authority. And now, it all made sense. The vault in his garage wasn't just a point of interest. It was a threat to them, not because of what was inside, but because they thought he had something that tied them to the land fraud, something that could unravel the quiet empire they'd built through forged contracts and HOA control. He didn't waste time. By sundown, he was on the road, driving north with the corkboard in the trunk, the photographs secured in a secondary case, and his backup weapon holstered under his jacket. No lights, no trail. The location took him far from neighborhoods, past the last paved road, down gravel paths where cell signals vanished. He arrived just after midnight. What looked like an abandoned barn sat ahead, tucked between hills. Weeds covered the path, windows boarded from the inside. It didn't look like anyone had been there in years. But Daniel knew how to read patterns. Fresh tire marks curved through the dirt. One small footprint, maybe female, rested near the doorway, and on the side of the barn, barely visible, was the same insignia he'd seen on the oldest HOA documents from Briar Glen, a barely faded stamp marked BLR Holdings. This place wasn't abandoned. It was the center. He approached slowly, circling the barn twice. A single camera blinked once above the entry, disguised as rusted metal. Daniel took the battery out before it could warn anyone. The lock on the door had been changed recently. New steel, recent scuff marks, and faint scratches, like it had been accessed with urgency. Inside, the barn wasn't empty. It was a document graveyard. Rows of crates, binders, maps, contracts. Every HOA in a 50-mile radius had a file. Property acquisitions, tax loopholes, voter overrides. But in the back beneath the tarp, Daniel found something worse. Photos of homeowners. Hundreds of them, labeled, indexed. Many had red X's across their names. Some were circled. His photo was among them, circled twice. Suddenly, a sound cracked outside. A car door slammed shut. Gravel shifted under heavy boots. Daniel ducked into the corner of the barn and drew his weapon. He shut the lamp and waited. Breath slowed. Ears tuned for footsteps. A voice called out, .mail.com. Measured. I figured you'd come here eventually. Daniel didn't move. The voice continued. You were always good at following trails. That's why we marked you first. Then silence. Daniel raised his weapon and watched the shadows crawl beneath the barn door. He wasn't alone anymore. Daniel didn't move. The voice outside was close now, standing just beyond the barn door. The wood creaked softly under a shift of weight. Then another voice spoke, female, this time, familiar, colder. Open the door, Daniel. There's no need for it to go sideways. It was Carla. Daniel's pulse slowed. He scanned the exit points. There weren't many. The barn had a rear service door, but it was padlocked. The small windows were too narrow, the ceiling too unstable to climb. He kept his weapon drawn and stayed behind the crates, every step from outside echoing through the dry wood walls. He waited, then the door handle turned. Just an inch. Whoever was outside didn't barge in. They were listening. Waiting, Daniel pulled a heavy file box from the stack beside him and slid it quietly near the barn's back wall. He reached for the edge of a filing cabinet and tapped it gently once. Twice, footsteps approached the door. Fast he ducked into the shadows as the hinges groaned open. A man stepped in first, not Kells, broader beard. Gloved hands. He held something under his jacket, small, metallic. Likely a sidearm. Carla followed right behind him, flashlight in hand. They didn't call out. They split directions. That was a mistake. Daniel waited until the man passed by the second stack of crates. He moved fast, catching the man in a tight shoulder hold and slamming him against the filing rack. The gun fell, clattering against the floor. Carla spun toward the sound. Flashlight beam sweeping the dark. Don't, Daniel said. She froze. I warned you, he added, voice low. You could have walked away. You don't know what's at stake. She hissed. I know enough. That man groaned behind Daniel but didn't get up. Daniel took Carla's flashlight and tossed it behind a shelf. Shadows swallowed them. You should have stayed out of it, she said again, voice steadier now. You think this is about money. This is legacy. Ownership. We built something. Daniel walked her backward, step by step, until her back hit a support beam. No, he said. You took something. She smirked. They let you retire. They never said you could win. Outside, another car approached. Headlights cut across the trees. A second vehicle. Reinforcements. Daniel acted fast. He opened a crate near the sidewall, pulling loose a bundle of marked files, HOA deeds, backdated signatures. Enough evidence to bury them all. He stuffed them into his bag, snapped a photo of Carla, and disappeared through the broken back panel he'd loosened earlier, just wide enough to squeeze through. The agents outside never saw him leave by the time they burst inside. Carla stood alone, the other man barely conscious, on the floor. The crates had been torn open, dozens of folders missing. Carla stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, chest rising fast. She knew what had just happened. Daniel was no longer chasing the truth. He was carrying it, and he wasn't planning to stay quiet. Daniel didn't drive straight home. He took the long route south, doubled back twice, and stashed the file bag in an off-grid locker just outside county lines. It wasn't caution anymore, it was survival. The documents weren't just evidence. They were proof of a long-running operation buried beneath legal terms and HOA silence. Fraud, forgery, intimidation. Enough to dismantle more than Briar Glen. By morning, Daniel was back in town. He didn't sleep. He didn't check the cameras. Instead, he sent out 3 envelopes. One to a former federal contact. One to an investigative reporter he trusted from a past life. And the last to the county registrar, marked urgent. Within hours, the calls began. The reporter showed up first. Her name was Wren, and she carried a camera like a weapon. She didn't waste time with greetings. Daniel handed her a flash drive. She didn't ask how he got it. She asked only one thing. Who else knows? Daniel nodded toward the end of the street. They will soon. That same afternoon, the Briar Glen HOA held a closed-door emergency meeting. Only 3 members showed. Carla didn't. Rumors moved quickly through the neighborhood. Someone had tipped off the board. Someone had told them files had leaked. But none of them knew yet that Daniel had kept the originals safe and secure. What they saw in emails and links was only the surface. That night, a black SUV idled outside Daniel's home. It didn't move. It didn't. Knock-tot. He turned off the lights and waited. At 1:13 a.m. The SUV backed away and disappeared. The next morning, his story aired. It wasn't under his name. Wren had kept that promise. The article ran with blurred images, redacted signatures, and a detailed timeline that stretched from the Briar Glen founding all the way to the moment. Carla tried to breach his garage. The town buzzed. Calls poured into the HOA office. The website crashed from public records requests. Homeowners from other neighborhoods began sending messages, some asking questions, others sharing their own documents, their own suspicions. By evening, 2 more board members resigned. Carla still hadn't been seen. Daniel returned to the locker that night and retrieved the second file set. It was time to go deeper. The bank records, the real estate rollovers, the fake maintenance invoices. Every piece tightened the noose around those who believed they'd been untouchable. But one detail still kept him up at night. Kells hadn't surfaced. If he was alive, he was hiding. If he was hiding, there was a reason. Then the letter came, no stamp, no return address. Slid beneath his front door while he'd been in the back room. Inside was a single photo. Daniel, in his garage, taken 2 days ago. On the back was a note, handwritten in tight block letters. You think it's over. It isn't, you only have what we let you see. He read it twice, then he lit it on fire. There would be no more messages, no more waiting. If they wanted to see what he really had, they'd see it all. The next morning began like any other. No knocks, no letters, no strange vehicles parked down the street. A fragile calm had settled over Briar Glen, but Daniel didn't trust it. Quiet didn't mean safe. It meant someone was waiting for him to move. But Daniel wasn't planning to run. He headed to a building on the edge of town. A place, long forgotten, an old ranger station deep in the hills, locked and layered with years of dust. It hadn't been on any registry for 2 decades. Daniel still had the key. He had helped build the place as part of a federal land survey, years ago. No one knew it was his. Inside, behind a wall that looked like insulation, was the real vault. The one no one else had touched. He unlocked it with care, one code at a time. Inside wasn't just paperwork, it was digital. A full data drive, scanned contracts, video recordings, phone logs, wire transfers, evidence stretching far beyond Briar Glen. Some connected to neighboring communities, others to shell companies that had fed off homeowner dues like parasites. But one file was marked with a date. The same day Carla had tried to breach his garage. He opened it, it was a recording. Not security footage, an intercepted call. Carla's voice came first. He still doesn't know about the second vault. We didn't find the drive. He's playing us. Then a second voice, deeper, slower, familiar. Martin, Kells, we don't need the drive. We just need to draw him out. The moment he takes it public, the leverage disappears. Daniel sat perfectly still. They never wanted the information destroyed. They wanted him to hold it, use it so they could take him down in the backlash. He had exposed them, yes, but not all of them. Not the deepest ones. Kells hadn't disappeared. He'd evolved, and now they wanted Daniel to finish the job for them by becoming the fire, so they could claim innocence through the smoke. Daniel backed up the entire drive again. Then he made the call. The same federal contact who'd flagged the silent alarm weeks earlier. The same one who'd stayed off the books 10 hours later. Federal vehicles rolled through Briar Glen at dawn. Agents moved in quietly. 2 arrests were made before sunrise. Carla wasn't one of them. She'd vanished again. But Kells hadn't. He was found 2 towns over, running a consultancy firm specializing in HOA restructuring. His arrest was quiet. No news, no photos. Only a small note passed to Daniel. A day later. We got him. You were right. It went higher than we thought. That night, Daniel stood outside his garage again. The one they all thought held the secret. He opened it and stepped inside. It was empty. Just tools, boxes, a bench with nothing important on it. That vault had never mattered. It had always been bait. He closed the door and walked back inside his house, locking it behind him, knowing the story was over, at least the part that would be told in headlines. The real work had already begun, and the ones who thought they ran the game were finally out of moves.